allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The agenda is adopted as stated. I do have some speaker cards here for a call to the public. Is there anybody else that has a speaker card that would like to turn it in? No? Okay. Remember to keep your comments appropriate. No use of foul language or anything that is derogatory towards staff or personnel. The board cannot respond, although we can take it into consideration and ask staff to follow up on it. And we would like to remind you to keep your comments to the 3 minutes if you possibly can. All right? So up first we have Mary Grace. I know, you didn't want me to pick you first, but it was on top of the pile. Got to shuffle them better.
Dr. Chestnut, President Anderson, and members of our school board, I'm here as a proud MUSD mom of accelerated learners. Upon looking into what our local charter schools have to offer, 2 of the key benefits that stand out are the accelerated curriculum and the level of the parental involvement. These 2 key factors are what sends families out of our doors and into their schools. As MUSD seeks to have charter schools within our district, I ask that you not only change the label of the schools, but strive to address the needs of our accelerated learners by strengthening our programs and increasing academic opportunities for our students. Most of you know that I am now going on my 5th year as a very proud Maricopa Wells parent. This past school year, we jumped at the chance to enroll our 6th grader into the 20+1 program. While others hesitated at the thought of a new program, I had faith in our district and teachers. MUSD, you did not let us down. The program was a great benefit to our son, which led to a very successful year. He was in a classroom with eager learners and very motivated teachers. He not only was an honor roll student, but he and his team were the recipients of 2 Future City Competition Awards that resulted in great honors and experiences. By combining the best of traditional learning in a classroom environment and incorporating modern technology, these students were enthusiastic about their lessons. Our 20+1 teachers made it their mission to ensure the students had fun while being challenged with their learning. The students and parents were always kept up to date of the lessons for the week. If there were any concerns at all with the student, the teachers immediately worked with both the student and the parents to ensure a successful outcome was reached. 20+1 provided a very positive experience for the students that was enhanced by a high rate of parental involvement. I don't have to tell you what that means to the success of the students. You get out of it what you put into it. Our 20+1 students, teachers, and parents work together as a team. I'd like to see this program continue to grow with the additional funding received from being a charter school. The abundant academic opportunities that will result from this will be a welcome sight in our district. Let's increase their academic field trips, the advanced opportunities, the on-site projects that include visits from engineers and companies, and let's work to keep this program growing into the higher grades as these students are promoted. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abel.
President Anderson, members of the board, Dr. Chestnut. I am Rick Abel. I live at 44176 West Garden Lane. Principal at Maricopa Wells and proud parent of a soon-to-be Maricopa Ram. She'll be a freshman next year, and that's pretty exciting in all kinds of ways. I'm here to speak in favor also of the charter school resolution on this evening's agenda. I understand the passage of the resolution will result in the district accepting charter school applications from 6 of our schools, including possibly Maricopa Wells. The quality of education and the options we can offer in our district are both come down to the availability of resources. Mr. Bartles talked about that in the past. We do not currently have the staffing, technology, or instructional resources required to meet the needs and expectations of all of our students, our families, and our community. The funding provided by the state of Arizona to our public schools does not provide sufficient resources to meet those needs. Only through additional funding sources such as an override or the increased funding that is provided to charter schools will we be able to, will our district be able to meet the needs of all the children and to provide learning opportunities that meet the expectations of our community as well. Making Maricopa Wells a charter school makes sense. Our 20+1 program is a great example of an educational option that helps kids learn and offers families a choice of learning environments. It will take additional resources to maintain and expand this program. The funding provided to Maricopa Wells as a charter school would help to grow the 20+1 program and to focus on our use of technology across the campus to improve student achievement. It will also help with the further implementation of our Helping Kids Succeed Panther-style program. Additional funding would also help to lower our class sizes, pay salaries that would help to train and retain and reward the teachers who are here. It would also provide additional educational options and opportunities for our students and their families. The additional resources available under the proposed charters and the additional choices for our students and families made possible with those resources will be valuable assets in our ongoing efforts to provide outstanding educational opportunities for all the students in the Maricopa Unified School District. This is a community dedicated to student success. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope you'll be able to support the charter school resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Abel. Mrs. Safranek?
Good evening, President Anderson and board members. My name is Eva Shafranek, principal of Santa Rosa Elementary School. I'm here to speak about the proposed resolution on charter schools. The Maricopa community appreciates choices and flexibility in the education of children. That is very evident in the fact that Santa Rosa student population consists of approximately 20% of students who are on boundary exceptions. 1/5 of our students attend our school not because we are their home school, but because we are a school of choice for our families. Having numerous charter schools in our community thriving is a clear indication that our families want the flexibility to select the school with the best programming and the school that meets the needs of their children. Having a charter school as part of our district would allow us to develop school programs that meet the needs and wants of our families, and offer programs that will keep students attending our schools. When we spoke with Santa Rosa parents, the idea of being able to provide programs focused on science and technology, language, or 21st century skills received a very positive review. Having additional funding to truly provide our students with 21st century learning focused on life and career skills, critical thinking, communicating, offering foreign languages, collaboration and creativity while incorporating the technology that students live with every day is one potential program opportunity that we at Santa Rosa would like to explore. We would love the opportunity to explore what the needs of our community are and the strengths of our staff and to develop a charter program that meets the needs of our students so that we can provide them with a world-class education, not just an excellent education. As a district, we need to strive to better ourselves and be innovative and creative because that is what is required to be successful in today's education. Doing things the way we have done will not get our students to learn better and will not get our students to perform higher. So I'm very much in a support of an MUSD charter resolution, and I would appreciate for you to support us as well. Thank you.
Joshua Judd?
Good evening to the board members, Dr. Chestnut. I wish I had 30 minutes for this one. I can't, still, as much as I've looked at it, I can't comprehend a public school controlling a charter. Just the whole concept of it in general to me is confusing. If the state was concerned about improving education, why don't they just provide more money for a new, separate, specialized public school and just call it that instead of a charter? This is the war that Arizona finds itself in, telling parents that choice is good for you because they don't want to fund the public school at the limits that they have been. That's what's going on. And the more they tell you that choice is good while they defund public schools, it's a falsehood, and you have to see it for what it is. Public schools are concerned with the public good. When you start towing the line with charters and privatization, you start losing the focus of what's the public good and what's the bottom line profit margin for your company. I've worked for one. I'm speaking from experience. I've seen this happen, okay? That's what will occur. Now, a public school being in charge of its own charter is again, I would lie to you if I said that I knew every nuance of what that means. But think for yourselves and look at the situation for what it is. Why not just give us the funding and call it another public school? They won't do that because there's laws on the books stating that they can basically, if it fails, that we're on the hook for it. What would happen at that point? And that's a question I pose to the board. What happens at that point? Are they expecting a private company to step in and fill the void? Is that the ruse? I don't know, and I'm not assuming to know. And I'm not saying that that's what would happen, but I want to know. I think those are the answers we need. Those are the questions we need answered. What are the contingency plans for failure? What does the school look like? If it is accepted, and again, I don't know all the nuances, so I can't oppose it across the board, but if it is accepted, it needs to be extremely specialized. It needs to be focused on either advanced kids or the other end of the spectrum, special ed needs. Parents that no longer want their children in the general ed population and see maybe that situation is harmful because it wasn't always the way it is now. There was a time where special needs students had their own school. And maybe, we revisit that. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm saying make it highly specialized. The public school should be still for the majority of the students, the kids in this city. That's what you want. You want a strong public school. Look at the Northeast and look at Northeast education and how they fare. They have a strong public school. People from upstate New York don't even send doctors, lawyers, don't send their kids to private school, even though they have the money to do so. They send them to the public school because they're so good. They don't need a choice. The public schools are so good that they don't need a choice. That's what Arizona needs to fight for. We are ranked 46th in the nation. We are being grouped with Deep South states as far as our educational success. That is something that people need to take seriously. We are the worst per pupil funded state in the country. Past the 3 minutes. Again, I wish I had 30. But I beg the board, I beg the parents to open up your eyes, see the whole situation for what it is. We're dealing with the short end of the stick as far as funding, and we're coming up with junk methods to try to fix it. And we need to demand from the state better funding for public schools. Thank you.
Mrs. Hildick?
Good evening, Dr. Chestnut, Ms. Anderson, and members of the board. My name is Janelle Hildick, and I reside at 43353 West Delia Boulevard. And I am here tonight to speak regarding the topic of the charter school resolution, as well as my colleagues. I'm not only an educator, over 20 years of education experience, but I'm also a parent of a Butterfield Bobcat and a Panther at Maricopa Wells. My son, who is at Maricopa Wells, is also a 20+1 student. And as I told my colleagues at a leadership meeting one day, this was the best year of all his time in school, and he tells me that all the time. So he is thrilled and loved the program, so I want to speak to that as well. And I feel part of that was the way it was taught, the teachers there to support, and the way the class was done. And it was real-world experiences for him. And there were many times that he came home at the end of the day saying, "Mom, I just can't stop, talking to my friends. I don't know what to do." And, I'm like, well, this is real world experience for you, honey. This is how it is in the workplace. And, so I think that is so important for kids, and they need to get that. And the sooner we give that to them, the more we're preparing them for the real world. And that's exactly what I loved about the class this year. Even though it wasn't as conventional as a regular class, I feel that it was teaching him some life skills that would prepare him for college and the real world. So I want to speak to that for our school at Butterfield. I did meet with parents, and we had some good discussions about what we wanted for our children and what we felt would be best. And the main topic that everyone discussed was wanting well-rounded children prepared for the future, prepared for college, academic rigor, and being prepared is the main goal, and the well-roundedness of it. So the arts, music, foreign language, and being able to offer all of those things to our children at the elementary level into middle school, so they are prepared for college and high school even. So that was the main goal that we discussed. We did talk about a charter school at Butterfield, if we could get those resources that focusing on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math would be our focus for Butterfield, because we feel that is so important for the future and preparing them to be successful citizens. So I don't have much to say, but I think that was the main gist of what I discussed with our staff and parents. So I support the resolution as well. Thank you.
Mrs. Williams?
Good evening, Governing Board President Anderson, Governing Board members, Dr. Chestnut. I am also here to speak to the charter school resolution. On May 15th and 16th, I facilitated 2 meetings for parents to talk about the potential of transforming some of our schools within the district into charter schools. Most of the parents that attended were indeed in favor of the idea. Research clearly states that when students respect each other and school staff and understand expectations for success and consequences for misbehavior, they are better able to actively engage in learning. This takes both teachers, administrators, and parents. So one of our major emphases at Saddleback would definitely be to require parents to be involved in their children's education. So we will require parents to actively be involved in learning. Instead of asking parents to sell candy bars or fundraise, first and foremost, we are going to ask parents to be involved in their students' education by reading a book each night of the week, by making sure that all homework is complete every night, by making sure that students are on time to school, by celebrating the success of their students at family meetings and school events, by being an active member of the school community, and by modeling the expectations that we have at Saddleback Elementary at home. If approved, Saddleback Elementary will require parents to be actively involved. We truly believe that great things can happen at Saddleback once all of our stakeholders are actively involved in the day-to-day routines at our school. So thank you so much for your time.
That brings us to the end of our speaker cards. Thank you those that took time to be here and to listen and to be a part of it. It's important that we have input, so thank you very much. All right, that brings us to our superintendent's report. Dr. Chestnut.
Okay, I'm ready to go here. The slides are ready to go. A good picture of our recent graduation ceremony at Maricopa High School. It was a very, very great night. Kind of the news of the day is congratulations to Dr. Ember Conley, the new superintendent of Park City School District in Park City, Utah. And if you pull up the website for Park City, Utah, this is the exact picture that you will see, and it's the top story at the top of their website. But they didn't give credit to inmaricopa.com, so I don't know, we should probably talk to them about that. But it's been my pleasure to work with Dr. Conley this year, and she has been a marvelous asset to our school district for 5 years. She has served as elementary principal, she's served as a district office administrator, she has served as acting superintendent, and this past year she served as deputy superintendent, really the last 2 years with that title. And she's been a tremendous resource to me. Being new, I obviously needed a lot of help and somebody to show me kind of the lay of the land and give me that information I needed to be effective. And she was just more than helpful and in every way from even before I arrived. started sending me emails when I was still in the state of Washington, talking on the phone, and helped me with that transition so much. So I really appreciate that, Dr. Conley, and the great help you've been to me. But I think I also speak for the school district when I say that we greatly appreciate your good work. And, you have really done great work for us on our behalf. And great example is the relationship with the Auction Indian community. And we know that I'll be talking about 2 different memorandums of agreement that we're working on with them. And one reason why those memorandums of agreement are in place or in process is because of the good work you've done to keep that relationship positive and moving forward. So that's just one example of your good work. Could go on, but you're going to be missed, and congratulations. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about you in a moment. So you're not off the hook yet. Congratulations also to Dr. Joe Veras. He is the newest staff member at Grand Canyon University. At least he was as of last Monday. They're big. They hire a lot of people, so, Anyway, we're very proud of Dr. Joe. He is moving on from the principal position at Desert Wind Middle School. He's done great work for us as well. And, I think the legacy he leaves for us is really founding our 20+1 program. Now, he was a good principal at Desert Wind also. I don't want to minimize that, but as Mary Grace talked about, and Janelle, the 20+1 program has gone well, and we're able to expand it this year, and I think it's a great model for the kinds of things we can accomplish. So congratulations, Joe. We'll also miss him as well. Speaking of principals, we have new principals at Pima Butte and Santa Cruz Elementary Schools, and we have the new principal, well, he will be after the board approves the personnel agenda. The new principal at Pima Butte and principal of the Pima Butte Mustangs will be Mr. Randy Lazar, sitting here in the front row. So stand up and take a bow, Randy. We're very excited to have Randy on the HR action sheet tonight, and he comes to us highly recommended with a lot of great experience, most recently as special ed director in the Tempe Union High School District for, I believe, the last 6 years, and has had an excellent career in education. And the cool thing about Randy's career is that it started right here in Maricopa as an elementary teacher many years ago, back when Circle K was the only place to get a hot dog, I believe. So he has some history with Maricopa, and we're very excited to be working with him. And then also at Santa Cruz Elementary, Ms. Gina Chaffin will be joining us as principal. She's not able to be here tonight. She had vacation scheduled, and we told her to go on vacation. And she'll be with us beginning the first week of July. But she comes to us also highly recommended with a lot of good experience, 5 years experience as an elementary assistant principal. And most recently, the last 2 years as assistant principal in Florence School District. So looking forward to working with her. And so we have 2 principals hired and 1 to go. We'll be working on the Desert Wind posting. It is posted on the website, and I checked with Tom today. There's a lot of interest in that position. We've had 21 applications, and it's been posted just about a week. So a lot of interest. So we'll keep you informed on that. Just have to mention our best of the best all-staff breakfast on the 24th. It was a great morning, and we were able to recognize the best of the best. We had well over 100 nominees, and we recognized the best 2 or 3 people in each category. This was the woman who won our Volunteer of the Year, and she was kind enough to come a lot to Maricopa Online and tutor our students in that program, and she did AIMS test prep with them, and just did a lot of good work. Just one example of the great people we have in our district. Some aren't even paid, and this was the volunteer category. And it was a great morning. It was a good way to end the school year. An update on our auction community issues or memorandums of agreement. If you will recall, I think it was 2 meetings ago, the governing board approved memorandum of agreement number 1, which really has to do with program coordination, really to put in writing the things we've been doing for a number of years, but we never had a formal agreement. How to work on sharing data, how to work on sharing information, how to work with the educational liaisons that the auction community employs at the high school, Maricopa Wells, and Saddleback. So it's really nice to have that stuff on paper, to have come up with an annual plan of how we're going to improve that, and have a regular quarterly meeting, or I should say a monthly meeting, to check on progress. So I had a meeting with Vivian Saunders and Bart Smith this week, and we're actually putting together a document, and we will bring that back to you for final approval. It says that in the memorandum of agreement that you will approve the annual plan, the tribal council will approve the annual plan, and then that'll be a good way for you to stay informed of our progress and how that's going. So we're working on that. And then memorandum of agreement number 2 has to do with the $2.6 million grant. And we had our first meeting on that topic this week. The city, of course, is also receiving a large sum of money, and it was a three-way meeting. The city was there, I was there representing the school district, and then, of course, Auction staff were there, and we just began talking about what this memorandum of agreement will look like. I sent you a draft of our proposal. It was well received by Auction staff, and they asked for some clarification, they asked for some details, and so I'm going to be tuning up that last document I sent you. I'll send you another copy of that to kind of keep you informed, but we should be having a memorandum of agreement to sign in the near future, so that's a fun project to work on. And I think that's it. That slide is for my next report.
Okay. Brings us to the governing board member reports. I do have a couple things, so let me, just one of them I do have, on behalf of the board, if Dr. Connolly could come up here, please. This is where we get to embarrass you. I just want you to know, as on behalf of the board, it has been an absolute pleasure to work with you, and you've gotten us through some interesting times. We have grown a lot, and we certainly appreciate all that you have done. We do have a plaque for you, although it's in the box, because it'll break. And I don't want to be responsible for breaking it. Understood. So it's not that we're trying to hide it from you, it's just I didn't want to break it. So we're going to give you the box. If you want to come up, can we take a picture with the board and you? The box. Scott, did you wear your flip-flops, or you wearing?
Got shoes and everything.
In the center. See, now I get to be bossy.
I know, that's good.
So this is your plaque, and there are some cards in there, so it's been amazing. All right. This is not feeling. Oh, there you go. So we are excited for you to adventure. You will be missed, so thank you very much. And I do have a little piece of a letter that you sent my son that I want to read, so he will.
I know, I'm trying to recognize it.
So I'm sure that the other board members do have, have comments as well, so I will open that floor to them. But you made a point to send a letter to every student. It wasn't just mine, but student who had perfect attendance. And in the letter you put, I know it takes tremendous determination to come to school each day, to be prepared to learn and give your personal best effort. Thank you for being a dedicated student and representing Maricopa Unified Schools. So that speaks highly of how you live your own example to the rest of our children. So I want to thank you for that and for setting an example for your dedication to education, and wish you the very, very best. So Sarah, I'm sure that other board members, they may have something. But he does cherish this letter. He doesn't let me forget it.
I have a story to share. This is a really nice story. It ties with the Auction Indian community, just as Dr. Chestnut mentioned earlier, the work you've done with us. But I'm going to go into the early beginning when this relationship with the Auction Indian community formed. I got a call from this lady. I was sitting on the tribal council at the time. Her name was Amber Conley. The secretary came in with this post-it note. She says, this lady wants you to call her. And I said, okay. And I do. And she says, I'm the principal at Saddleback. Was it Saddleback? Butterfield. And I would like to come and talk with your council. And you were going to discuss some, was it your dissertation? What you had learned with our Native American kids. And I'm like, well, sure, come along. And we don't know who Ember is. We just know, there's this lady who wants to come and show us. And she comes in, and she just, with her bubbly personality, and there's, a 5-member council, and all 4 of them were men, and they're very, poker-faced gentlemen. They don't express themselves very well when they're sitting behind a big table. And she's just coming in and bubbly, and how are you? And she really resonated with the council, and how she shared her story about Native American children and their learning styles, and how they learn more through art and with their hands and hands-on kind of thing. They're very creative people. I think that's just the way Native Americans are. They see things, they have to feel it, they have to touch it, they have to experience it, that's just how it is. And we were extremely impressed with her. And from that time forward, we just all had this incredibly deep respect for her and for helping the kids. And it turned into a moment where I shared some of the culture with some of the children at another time, another meeting. But it started there, and I really thank you so much for building that relationship with our community. And really, you were key in bridging that gap. Just the little tiny strings that we're pulling together at that time. So thank you so much for that. And Dr. Chestnut, thank you for coming back in with us and moving in here, and you two working together. You both have done a fine job with our community, and now the City of Maricopa, MUSD, and the Auction Indian community are all joined together, and we're working together, and it's great, so thank you.
Oh, no.
No?
I know, it's sad.
Dr. Conley, I respect you so much that I'm going to choose not to share any of my stories. Suffice it to say, it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with you, and certainly would have many fewer laughs through the years. I don't know about the quantity of tears, if that would have changed or not, but you've been a great source of inspiration and support for me through my tenure here. And pardon me, you're an absolute all-star, and you do a great job in Park City, and they're lucky to have you.
So thank you again. I do have one more update on the board, and then you all may have some other updates as well. On Friday, I spent the day in Phoenix. I serve on the legislative committee for the Arizona School Board Association. And so we spent a whole day trying to come up with what our legislative focus is going to be, because of what Mr. Judd spoke of, as well as other issues. So the good news is I won't go into a lot of details right now, but the past legislative agenda that ASBA has presented has had 123 items. It's really hard to focus on 123 items. So what the legislative committee came up with, which we're very excited, is we've reorganized how the delegate assembly works, how legislative issues are focused. And so we actually have focused it into 3 areas, which is session specific, which means what can we accomplish this coming session in 2014? What is on the horizon? And then we've got subcategories underneath that. And then the next one is short-term issues, which is what do we know we can accomplish and change in the next 2 to 3 years? Then there's a long-term, which means what's the long-term goal and vision for our schools and our public education system? And that would be anywhere from 3 to plus years. And certainly a lot of those things float back and forth. But there is movement, and there are going to be some, I'll have some other updates on the legislative issue. I know that some of you are interested in it. But that's kind of the short version. There will be more to come in the delegate assembly. I think that as a state and as a public school system, we will be able to unify and come up with some common goals that will benefit all of our schools and public education. So there is a grassroots effort, and I just want everyone to continue to be involved. So I'll have more issues or updates on that if there's any other. That's my updates. Anything else? No? All right. Moving on. Information items, work study. Dr. Chestnut.
I think we are ready for the monthly financial report from Mr. Roush.
Are those mics not turned on? Well, Mr. Roush, we have a microphone right here.
And Dr. Chestnut, you have the financial report in front of you, and we have a detailed memo. I would ask you if you have any questions about that, and I'm here to answer those.
Are you talking about the memo that you sent out on the updates from the budget committee, or from the legislative budget?
Monthly
Oh,
financial
okay.
report with the memo.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I don't have any questions on the financial report. Anybody else?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. And I'll,
So moving ahead.
moving
5B.
ahead.
That's you, Mr. Roush, also.
Yes. And like to go over some of the proposed budget information, and I have been sending you updates. When I did prepare this last week, there's been a lot of updates, almost daily, twice a day there's updates. So I'll go over some of the stuff and a little bit of the process to date. Expenditure cuts were needed, and we all know that, of about $1 million. And we had a budget committee that met for 3 months and made recommendations to the superintendent's cabinet. We went over that several times. Superintendent has a list of about $1 million of items to balance the budget, including all-day K cut and other miscellaneous cuts that we went over several times. Currently, the legislature has not recommended a budget to the governor. July 15th is the deadline. 3 or 4 years ago, it went past July 15th all the way into August. And you may know that the governor called a special session, unprecedented special session, because she called him back in. And there's bills that are affecting the budget that are almost hourly, and we're getting updates on that. When that happens, the Arizona Department of Education takes that information and then puts it into formulas. The formulas are then put into worksheets that the districts then use. Well, we've got some of that information, and we've got some preliminary worksheets, as I've put up there, but we don't have the finalized proposed budget worksheets. We hope to have them soon, but again, it depends on when the governor signs the budget, and then ADE and the Auditor General's office then come out with worksheets. So it could be pushed back quite a ways, and that's kind of out of our control. But we do have some preliminary estimates, and we're going with those as far as we can. So pretty much the process to date. General estimates. The budget revenue limit, we think, will be about $28,750,000. When I did this, there was supposedly an unrestricted capital budget limit and a soft capital budget limit. Well, they did away with those funds. They created another fund. So we'll work with that. We think the federal projects will be about $4.5 million. Again, the expenditures then would be about $28,750,000, and the combination of the unrestricted capital and soft capital is another fund, and we don't have the specifics on that, but we have some of the information on that. So the total budget subject to limits will be about $30,350,000, somewhere in that realm. Other fund and budgetary highlights. We all pretty much know about the sequester that went on. 5% of all base budgets have been reduced. So that doesn't mean that we might have a higher budget, because it's just the base. And if our data comes back, for instance, in title, that supports additional learning, that the base would be higher, then it's just 5% of that base, or 95% of the base. So we could have more money, but we're still going to have a 5% reduction of what that would have been. We also know, though, that 301 funds are estimated to be higher for 2013 and 14. And it looks like 25 to 30% higher. So Fund 11 may increase salary base for certs next year. We'll find out how much that is. Fund 12 may be higher for performance pay for certs. And by the way, we're about ready to pay out this year, which is quite a bit more than last year. So over $900, I think, higher this year. And so next year it'll be even higher. Fund 13 may have more teachers for class size reduction, since the overall base is calculated in a formula. So those are some positives. We also know that with the auction, we'll put that in a separate fund, and that will be reported monthly. And we've talked about that quite a bit. Dr. Chestnut has went over that several meetings. Title I and ELL grants, again, may be higher, even though the base is getting cut 5% for federal programs. ELLs looks like it may be a little bit higher, which is be a positive for us. Right now, well, as I prepared this, 2 budgets were being negotiated, and the governor's budget has 1.8% increase. I think that's probably the one that's still a little bit on the table, as I've sent just even recently information today, but we'll see. Transfers will still need to be made from the capital projects, from the capital funds, or it'll be called a different fund now to help balance the budget. We still need to do some minor transfers in there. Some MSD utility rates will be increasing. We know that global water, for instance, will be going up. ED3 is about the same, and we hope, obviously, with some of the web-based improvements that we've done, that that'll be a cost saving for us too. We'll have to go through a year. The retirement rates are going up, and that's employer and employee slightly. So some of the budgetary highlights right now that we know. And that's pretty much it. I've sent a lot of other detail to you, and I'm open for any questions right now.
I have 2 questions. On the previous slide where it says the federal fund, the federal projects at $4,500,000, what are those?
The biggest share of that is the food service free and reduced.
Okay.
And it's the special ed IDEA, Title I, II, and III, and various other federal grants that are in there.
So it's federal grants?
It's federal grants.
Okay,
mostly.
that we've
Mostly.
applied for and
Right, that are ongoing.
potential, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Cabot, and CTE, basic grants. And, yeah, they're pretty much generic grants that have been going on and on and on for us. Increasing a little bit because our population is
Right.
increasing, the demographics and census has changed some of that information that increases them.
Okay. And then the capital funds change. I mean, I knew they were going to take away the soft capital.
Yeah.
We don't know what it's going to be called yet. Will it have the same qualifications, the same pots of money
No,
that
I
they?
think it's going to
Okay.
have more flexibility. Also, as I sent you today, they're coming up with another concept.
Yes, I know.
Called a performance fund.
Yes.
So, and how they're going to come up with that is still interesting, and where they're going to come up with that
It was
from.
a
Because
good
at one
discussion
point-
on Friday.
Yeah, and at one point, they said they were going to take money from
Yes.
other parts of the budget, so we'll see. Yeah. It
It
is
was-
really ongoing. I'd like to say it's fun to watch, but it's a little unnerving when you have to then go ahead
Yeah.
and put that into a budget, but it's okay.
No, that was my questions, because those were heated topics on Friday when we all met with the school district, so it's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you, Mr. Roush.
You're welcome.
5C, Dr. Connolly.
Good evening, President Anderson, Vice President Cutray, members of the board, Dr. Chestnut. It is with excitement and also a lot of sadness that I give you my last report. So rather than going through all the great data that we did receive back, and I'm very excited once they are finished in the embargo stage and our letter grades come out, I will, of course, be watching these on YouTube. I have to have my Maricopa fix to be able for those scores to be shared with you. So tonight, as you see on the PowerPoint, these are some pictures that I found. And these are just clip-its, and I wish she was here. Oh, there's one more, hold on. This one, next one's even better. Mr. Abel, there's one of Mr. Abel that's hysterical. There he is. This was part of Mr. Roush's fish philosophy, and how that our workplace,
Oh no, I'm enjoying every moment of this. Do you remember that phone call that I received regarding my daughter being dress coded? I'm loving this. No, I'm just teasing you, Mr. Abel. We've had some fantastic memories, but on the screen are just memories that I've had here in Maricopa, and Zoe had her snacks in the bottom of my drawer, so she knew exactly where to go. I want to say thank you for having the faith in me in the last 5 years, but particularly last year. I truly believe that the experience that I was provided has now reached me to this level. I have grown professionally, but also personally. Maricopa has and will always be my home. So you can't get rid of me too fast. I've made some very lasting friendships, and as much as I have wondered about Facebook and its credibility and what our children really should be doing, I'm actually very much looking forward to being able to stay connected on Facebook. I want you to know that this decision was not easy, and looking at both professionally and personally, it was not something that was in my 5-year plan right now. But I've had some wonderful mentors, and one of them is sitting right here with you. We have bonded, and I have made him be my mentor. And even when I've thrown some tantrums, he'll kindly say, I'm going to go ahead and go to lunch, and I'll listen to your tantrum after I go to lunch. And that taught me a very valuable lesson that sometimes maybe I just need to go to lunch rather than throwing my tantrum. But with that said, I have had mentors, 2 very important mentors, that have taught me the importance of who I need to continue to be as a leader, and that is opening doors for others, because that is what my mentors have done for me. They have opened doors for me. I also want you to know that as I was interviewed for this position, I made it clear that I was extremely happy in my current position, and that this was not something done in haste, that there were many professional and personal reasons that I have accepted this offer from Park City. And I think one of my family members exited, but I want to thank my family that has continued to support me in all of my endeavors, and we look forward to this next chapter. But he had to kindly leave to meet the movers. So I can't again tell you how very much I love you all and what Maricopa has meant to me and the students. And I'm excited to see where Maricopa will continue to go in the next couple years. That does conclude my final presentation, and thank you for listening to the entirety.
Thank you, Dr. Connolly. Strategic plan update, Dr. Chestnut.
Aaron, can we make sure we add into the budget for next year to get 2 of those clickers?
Well, as you know, we were involved in a strategic planning update process this year. We started back in January. We had about 30, 35 people on that committee. Many of them are sitting in the room. And we had really good discussions over many weeks and came up with a good draft. And I want to talk a little bit about that tonight. It's still in draft form. I'm still putting the finishing touches on it. I've done gathering information, so now it's just a matter of putting it all together. So I want to give you a preview tonight, and also want to just kind of use this opportunity to talk a little bit how I think this document and our current document kind of fits into where we want to go as a district, because, you know, that's, I think, really why we're in this strategic planning process, is how can we come up with a roadmap, a blueprint that'll help us get where we want to go in the next few years. And certainly not a silver bullet, and it doesn't solve all those issues, but it does help give us some guidance and direction. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then later this summer, I'll be coming back with the final draft in final form for you to look at and tweak, and then we'll get final approval, and we'll have a new three-year strategic plan for the school district. So the first thing I want to go over was our vision statement, and this is the draft vision statement. Just to show you what our current vision statement is. It is Maricopa Unified, a community dedicated to student success. After lengthy discussions, and if you're on that committee, you would think, now, if you weren't in that committee, you would think, why would it take several discussions to, come up with a 5-word vision statement? Well, you have to attend one of those meetings to really know the answer to that, but it's not just because of Scott Bartle either. It was a long discussion and a good one, and really gets to what is our philosophy of education in Maricopa Unified. It's a wonderful discussion to have. But what we came up with in draft form anyway is MUSD, an exemplary school district. I highlighted the word exemplary because we're going to be talking about our charter school resolution tonight. So I just wanted to highlight a few words that I think apply to our discussion later this evening on the charter school resolution. Clearly, that word was chosen with great care, and there's a desire for our district to be exemplary in this draft vision statement. In a similar way, our current vision statement has a little bit different emphasis, and that's really an emphasis on student success. So both very important issues, and in both cases, our current vision here and our possible next version on the previous slide. Moving on, our mission statement. This is our current mission statement. The mission of the district is to ensure all students achieve their potential in school, career, and life by unifying student, staff, curriculum, and community in a safe, supportive learning environment. I may be missing a comma in there. I typed this up myself. So this is the draft mission statement. The mission of the Maricopa Unified School District is to ensure all students achieve excellence by preparing them to be lifelong learners and responsible citizens that value innovation and global diversity. One of the themes of our discussion this past winter, January, February, as we met, was innovation. How can we make our educational programs innovative and respond to student needs? So I highlighted those words because I think those may apply to our charter initiative, this value of innovation. But in a similar way, our current mission statement, I think the phrase that maybe would apply most to our charter discussion is all students achieving their potential. So anyway, those are the kind of the new mission statement, the old mission statement. Moving on to beliefs. Let's start with current belief statements that are adopted by the governing board. There is actually a long list. It's really a long list, and you'll see when you look at the draft belief statements, the committee recommended a shorter list, a little more focused. Probably no one right way to do it, but I pulled out 4 examples from our current belief statements that I think really speak to our charter school initiative. And in our current belief statements, there is a major emphasis on involving parents, involving people in the discussions about education in our district. And I do believe that will be one of the most exciting things if we move forward on charters, is to have that discussion at each school site, to involve the parents, to involve the staff in deciding what is the area of focus, what should our educational program look like. I can't imagine a better discussion to be having at a school site, and some of the comments from our principals kind of reflected that idea. And then the draft belief statements are a little different. They're a little more broad, and this is the entire list. I believe actually there's about 25 or maybe even 30 belief statements in the current adopted belief statement list. And we used that as inspiration, but the committee said, let's make them shorter and sweeter, and we came up with 6 of them. And I think the draft belief statements kind of capture that same idea and just a little broader language there in number 2 to create strong partnerships with teachers, parents, and families. Kind of that same idea, getting parents and families involved in their local school. And I think that is one thing that charter schools possibly could help us with that goal, with that belief. Okay, moving on. I believe that the best part of a strategic plan And the best part are the goals. Because I think that for an organization, you need some areas of focus, some things you want to work on. What do you want to accomplish in the next 3, 4, 5 years? And this is where the goal setting really comes in and helps us. So this is the part I'm currently working on. Once I bring this back to you, each of these 6 goals will have an action plan, or sometimes we call it a SMART goal that has the who, what, when, where, and why related to each item and the timeline and that kind of thing. And I'll be bringing that back. But these are the 6 goal statements that are in draft form. And the top 3, I think, really apply to our discussion of charters. To improve student learning. That is our number 1 priority. And these ended up being in priority order. Number 2, to increase and expand innovative learning opportunities. That word innovative worked its way in there again. Number 3, improve community and family partnerships. And I think those 3 in particular apply to our charter discussion that we'll have later tonight. So that's just kind of a preview of what you'll be looking at when I bring this back to you. And that is all I have on my strategic plan update. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Board members, any questions, thoughts? No? All right, thank you, Dr. Chestnut. It was a long process, but it was well worth it. I learned a lot. So that brings us to our consent agenda. Do we have any motions?
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved as stated. Item 7A, our HR discussion and possible approval of personnel schedule, which includes resignations, reclassifications, terminations, non-renewals, new position requests, employment ratifications, stipends, leave of absence, FMLA requests, and other administrative actions. Mr. Beckett.
President Anderson, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Chestnut, you have the personnel schedule in front of you tonight that we'd like to have you consider for approval, and I will entertain any questions.
I have a couple questions too.
The new position of the business services clerk, is that a full-time position or is that a part-time position?
Yes, Member Coutray, at this point in time, we are planning for that to be a full-time position, yes.
Okay. That's the only one I had.
That's it?
Yeah, well.
Okay. Employee number 3.
That was my question.
So I'm going to go through a couple of these.
Okay, very good.
Why, out of 12 employees that have the same reason for resigning or non-renewing, or 12 that have the same reason, why is only one assessed the $1,000 contract assessment fee when all the rest of them fit into the same category?
President Anderson, the contract that we have presently is very specific, that once an individual signs the contract and then resigns after that fact, the district has the prerogative to exercise that $1,000 liquidated damages fee, as it's spelled out in the contract language. This is the only individual in that situation at this point in time.
I just have concern, I mean, mainly because all the rest of them have the same little asterisk, so I guess it's whether or not they turned the contract in or didn't turn it in.
Not necessarily. Many of those people actually turned in resignation letters prior to their contract being null and void at the end of their period of time they had to sign that contract in.
Okay.
Is that good?
It does. I mean,
Okay.
I just, I did receive a letter, and I know we all
Sure.
did, on number 3, and I'm just concerned that I just want to make sure that it's following policy and that's not being unequal.
Understand.
So I'm just clarifying that. And then the other question I have is, let me move on down to the stipends. I'm sure you knew I was going to ask this. Employee 55.
Yes.
That amount, is that for the total year, or is that per semester, or is that per year? I mean,
At this point in time, it is just for the first semester.
that's just first semester?
Correct.
Year or next year?
For this coming school year,
For this
13,
coming
14.
school year.
Correct. I apologize, that wasn't specific in there. Yes, it is just for the first semester.
Of 2013.
And that's what it was
14.
before?
It is, yes.
Because I just have some concerns with that amount. I know we questioned that last year. That would be $8,000 a year on top of our current. Okay. I just have some concerns with that. So I don't know if we need to pull that one off and talk about it, but
I think we can talk about the fact that, if I understand correctly, not this school year, but the previous school year, that was actually a full-time position.
Correct.
And it was changed to a stipend position for a total of $8,000.
That is correct.
So it was really a cost-saving measure.
Approximately $30,000+ is what we saved by making that move.
okay. All right. Those were my only questions, only. Anybody else have any questions?
Question, so.
Okay, any
I move
comments,
that we approve the
concerns?
personnel schedule.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve,
I'll second.
and we have a second. Any last minute discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Beckett.
Thank you.
7B, discussion and possible approval of resolution of charter schools beginning with the 2013-14 school year. Dr. Chestnut.
A few more slides here, and this is the third consecutive governing board meeting. We've been talking about charter schools and options for 2013-14 school year. So, as you know, I love to recycle my slides, but I do tune them up a little bit each time, so they're not totally the same. And I want to emphasize just a few things, the areas in red, just to revisit a few things. So, letter C, we talked about one advantage of charter schools that they do give us more flexibility, and that is a list of examples there. I just want to make that really clear. We've always talked about a 200-day school year is a possibility for a charter, but it's only one of many possibilities. And the advantage is that right now, if we wanted to have a 200-day school year for Maricopa Unified School District, we could only do it district-wide or not at all. We couldn't just have one school that says I want to have a 200-day school year. Whereas with a charter, that is some flexibility that they have, and that would be an interesting discussion for the different school sites, because the state does provide additional funding. For a 10% longer school year, you get 5% more funding. So that's a discussion that a school would have to have, and they might decide, we still want to do that, but we don't know. That's why I'm looking forward to these discussions. Letter F. This is an important one, and I think I said, I put the word will in there. Charter school employees will receive the same employment contracts, retirement, benefits, et cetera, as other MUSD staff. And I inadvertently used the word may before, but the goal would be, and my recommendation would be, that we have true public charters. There are options, and I think one of the previous speakers mentioned that. I mean, you could literally have a for-profit charter school. Now, a public school district couldn't run that, but clearly some of our charters are for-profit. Many of them are non-profit, so technically we would continue to run public, non-profit charters. And it's an interesting phenomenon, really, in the state of Arizona. As I understand it, that was very uncommon when the charter school initiative started about 20 years ago. Charters were separate, and they were either for-profit or they were non-profit, but they typically had a separate governing board, a separate board of directors, and all that kind of stuff. But the law clearly allows, and our own governing board policy, LBD, allows public school districts to take advantage of this charter school option. So it's kind of a hybrid. It's a unique way of looking at charters. And but our goal would be to continue to use all of the same governing board policies in relation to all of the charters that we decide, if we decide to adopt them, and likewise the same employment contracts, salary and benefit package, everything. All that would stay the same. So that's a unique thing, really, in Arizona law. Every state does it a little bit differently, and that's one option we have. It is a bit of a hybrid public school, but would be very much a public school even though it would be charter. And then letter G, I ended up with feedback from 7 schools on this issue of what do you talking with parents and staff, what do you think about the possibility of charters in the future? And once again, all 7 sheets of feedback that I received, not one of them said, heck no, we don't want to do it, it's a bad idea. There were tons of questions, but there was a lot of interest too. Tell me more. What about this? What about this? And many of those questions we've been answering, I've been answering. We've answered some of them here, and there's always more questions. But I thought that was good, that there wasn't just an answer that was, no, we don't want to do that. Letter H, that's a new idea, and I haven't emphasized this enough. Some of these things we've talked about, but I never put them in writing. We would continue to hire accredited and highly qualified teachers, just like we currently do in all of our schools. And accredited means that you are accredited by the state of Arizona and you have a teaching certificate, principal certificate, superintendent certificate. I just got mine updated. I'm very proud of that. You're accredited, and there's a rigorous accreditation process. Not all charters don't have to have accredited teachers at all. Many of them do, but that's not required. That is one requirement we would continue in our charter schools just like we would in all of our schools. And then once again, highly qualified is the federal designation. It's in addition to the state accreditation, you have to meet highly qualified standards. Our goal is to have 100% of our teachers highly qualified, and we are at about 95% this year, and that is permissible. You just have to inform parents that for whatever reason this teacher is not highly qualified currently. In many cases, they get highly qualified by the end of the year or by taking that extra test that they need to take or take that extra class. So many of those people do become highly qualified. But with our turnover, this is a constant issue. But even in Washington State, it was very similar. The goal is always 100%. But when you get to be 95% highly qualified, that's pretty good too. But once again, that's another requirement that charters don't have. And we would continue to do that with charters in our district. Letter I, improved academic focus that will improve the academic achievement of students. I just didn't really put that in writing, but I think that's the whole purpose of creating a charter. You want to create an area of focus that will improve the academic achievement of students. So Janelle Hildick from Butterfield was talking about they're very interested in pursuing STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. What would that look like? That's just one example, and I think that's what I'm most excited about is those conversations that we'll have as we develop these charters. Letter J, possible increase in enrollment. I mean, that's the goal, right? We want to create attractive programs that we end up with a waiting list at each school. That is, I think, our ultimate goal, is to have a waiting list at each school. And last time I checked with Joe, we actually have a waiting list at 20+1, which is wonderful. That's an example of how popular that program is, and that would be the goal. And maybe those students will come just from another elementary school across town, but maybe they'll come from students that are currently going to Kyrene, or maybe they're currently going to local charter schools. One of our principals talked about the fact that parents want options. That's true, and it's not just true in Arizona. We've become a very consumer-oriented society in relation to choosing our educational programs for our kids, and I think this is a way to give parents more choices than we currently have. It'll be a good vehicle for us to bring that initiative forward. And then letter K, MUSD facilities won't need state facility board funding for the next 15 years. That's one awesome advantage we have. We have very new facilities. Our 2 oldest schools are 10 years old. And schools are built to last, 25 to 35 years before you really need to remodel them. And so that's a unique option we have. Districts with older facilities, this is something that maybe they couldn't consider quite as much. But I think we're in a unique place to say, hey, we aren't going to need a major renovation for at least 15 years in these schools, because many of them are less than 10 years old. So those are some of the pros, not all of them. Be glad to take any questions if you have any as I go. Get the right button here. Cons. We've talked about this con list, and letter E, I think I've talked about it, but I didn't put it in writing. I mean, one con is that we don't have these charter documents done yet, but we're not required to do that, and it actually makes some sense, because in the first year you really don't get any charter school funding. So we're going to take the year to develop those charters and get them publicized to parents. And so that by the time that funding begins to roll in, then we'll have those resources to match up with the program that we want and be able to get that done. I would envision a process with timelines that would really be directed from the district office and myself and Krista Roden. For example, we'll take the lead on that. We'll work with the principals. It'll be a good cooperative effort to say, hey, we want to have this done by October 1st, this done by November 1st, this done by December 1st, et cetera. And I think that we can make that happen and provide the support that principals need to get it done. Moving on. I've showed you this chart before, and there is a difference in funding. There is a financial advantage to becoming a charter school district, and the answer is in the bottom right-hand corner. It's approximately $1,164 more per student for charters, whether they are chartered by a school district or a private company. And so that's an advantage. If you look at that in total, if we took 5 elementary schools, which would be approximately 3,000 students, and 1 middle school, and remember our middle schools are going to be smaller next year, only 450 students in each of them. You can see the traditional funding that we would get with those students in this coming year. This is based on this year's numbers. Be a total of $14.7 million. Second column would show that charter school funding, you don't get much in the first year. And I only listed, what you get is new students. So that's pretty much kindergarten students at the elementary level. And they're only half day, right? They're only half-time students, so you just don't get that much for them. It's about $38,000, which is nice, but it's not a big sum. It is possible we could get funding for 6th grade students, but technically they're not new to those elementaries. So that's something we're going to have to get a final answer to. But I put the conservative number up there. It's not going to be much money, much additional revenue in that first year. Second year is when the full funding for the charters kicks in. And it's pretty amazing. You can see the difference. So that's the red column. You can kind of throw that out for the comparison. But the difference in year 2 for elementary schools would generate $3.5 million in additional funding. A middle school would generate $500,000 more in additional funding for a total of $4 million. And so there's good revenue there, and it would be helpful, I think, to us and to our programs. And I have heard the question, what if this doesn't work? It's interesting. Each state has a different way of setting this program up. As long as we remain financially viable, as long as we meet audit requirements, as long as we offer the program that we've promised our parents we're going to offer, that's our obligation. And there isn't a state process to shut down charters for lack of performance or satisfaction. That ends up being a local problem that board has to deal with. So if we continue with MUSD Governing Board being the board of directors responsible for that charter school, they're going to have to deal with those issues, but we're not going to be at risk of having to pay back that money because it's not working out. We're going to be obligated to work through the problems that are brought to us, but that would be the obligation. Now, in some states, I think it's quite different. I think you can lose a charter for not meeting benchmarks and that kind of thing, but that at this time is not a requirement in the state of Arizona. Okay, moving on. The recommended charter schools for 13-14 would be 5 elementaries and 1 middle school, and that is the maximum number of schools that we could charter. The state requires that we have 1 traditional option at each level. So there'd be 1 traditional elementary and 1 traditional middle school, and we only have the 1 high school, so that's really not an option there. Those are the 5 that I would recommend. Discuss this with principals for several weeks, and the school that's not on the list, you can see, is Pima Butte Elementary, and I mentioned that to Randy tonight to make sure that he knew, because I think we forgot to tell him about this in the interview. But Pima Butte is a high-performing school, and so the rationale is, why would you change a school that's getting an A grade? And they're doing good things. We think that all of our schools are capable of earning an A, and that would be the goal in their charter as they become charters. And so that's the rationale there. And just to remind you, our past discussion, these would remain neighborhood schools. That would be the goal. Kind of like they currently are, right? I mean, we are currently schools of choice. And so currently at Santa Rosa, 20% of the kids are from outside of that service area, but they choose to go there. We have an open enrollment process that would all continue. And I think it would just be there'd be more decisions for parents to make, because they would be able to say, well, what kind of program would my child fit in best, and which school would that be? And then the parent would exercise that open enrollment option. So all those current policies would remain in place. I think they'd work very well in a charter format. And then Maricopa Wells Middle School would be my recommendation for a charter. And I think the main reason is just because Mr. Abel is a veteran principal. I think he could do a good job of providing the leadership to come up with a good charter for his school. We'll have a new principal at Desert Wind. But I do have to admit that that answer is not quite as, I could go either way. If the governing board felt like we needed to make Desert Wind Middle School our charter, I think that's something that I would certainly be willing to consider. And in talking to Mr. Abel, he would be willing to consider too. I think he's excited about the possibility of Maricopa Wells becoming a middle school, but we know it would be a reasonable task for the new principal at Desert Wind to take on as well. So there is maybe a decision point there, but I wanted to make my recommendation to kind of get the ball rolling. And I think that's it. Glad to take any questions.
All right. I know you've all got questions, so. Mrs. Gay? Can you move your microphone? Veronica, can you move your microphone up and speak into the...
Yeah, I can't find my printout, but can you go back a couple of slides? It was regarding the, I think it's that one. Go forward. This one here, yeah. Where it says middle schools and charter for the first year. Why is there 0 there?
Yeah, if we had kept our middle schools for next year as grades 6, 7, and 8, we would definitely get funding for the new 6th graders coming in. But since we're changing the format for next year and 6th grade remains at the elementary, they're technically not new to that elementary school. And I have a feeling that may be exactly what the state tells us. So I would certainly argue and say, well, come on, they're new to that school because we've never had 6th grade there before. I mean, I would advocate for that, but sometimes you don't always get what you want. I tried to put the conservative number up there, which could very well be 0.
My understanding was it was only new students to your district as to when you get the funding for the charter schools. That's why kindergarten, because they are new to our district.
Right, that makes sense. So that's why I didn't understand why there was 0 for the middle school.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yes, I think that it's also true that new students to the district, I think that does factor in. I wanted to put a conservative number up there, and maybe we just don't have any new kids move in. I don't think that's reality, but it's going to be a relatively small number. It's going to be a relatively small amount of money.
Okay, so whoever's coming into the district.
Right. This would represent just 5 elementaries and half-time students, yeah. So it's a small amount of money.
Well, I have a question. I think that we talk about all of our middle schools in the entire district, and we've got one school it's an A school, and I feel like the same you do. I feel like we are capable of bringing those levels way up. We have to meet those goals anyway, whether we're a chartered or a public school. So I'm just a little concerned. And this feels like such a change, and maybe it's not a huge change. Maybe it is a huge change, and maybe I just don't have enough information. But what would be the difference between us turning into a charter and achieving those goals versus staying in the staying public schools and achieving those goals? We can do that anyway. We're going to have to do that anyway. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of this is that it's kind of a new way of looking at how we're going to offer our public schools. And, I'm an old public school guy, and I've always thought, well, I'm proud to be a public school guy, and we're making this work. And, you know, I think one common characteristic, it's not always the case, but it was true in Washington. You generally try and make your elementary schools pretty much uniform district-wide, which really helps with, you know, curriculum adoption and professional development and that kind of thing. But the marketplace is changing. There's kind of a new normal out there. There is an expectation that we will have lots of different choices and options for students. And so that's why districts like Paradise Valley and Vail, districts like Cave Creek have taken their traditional schools and turned them into charters. And it really comes down to funding is really the reason. Programs cost money. To make distinctive programs for your school, it costs money. And, you know, this is the reason we offered an override, and charters, becoming charters would give us the resources we need to provide those extra programs that we need to provide so that we can make our schools more appealing to parents. And it's not all about the money. I have to say that if it was just about the money, we shouldn't do it. But this is a vehicle to get us where we want to go. It is true, we could have these same discussions in our schools. How do we want to improve our program? But if we don't have any additional resources to change the program, that conversation is going to be limited. This opens up the possibilities, not that we have an unlimited budget by any means, but we'll have additional funding equivalent to about an override to get us where we want to go. So it's kind of a long answer, but I think it's an important question, and it is a little bit of a change in the way we are offering public school options to parents that I think in our consumer-oriented society makes a lot of sense.
You have administrated has been really positive, correct? You know,
It has been, yeah. There were 7 different schools that participated, and you heard some of the principals talk about that. A lot of interest. A lot of questions, tough questions. It's not like, oh, yeah, let's just do it, and how fast can we do it? It's more like,
Right.
here's some really good questions, and if we can answer all these really good questions, we might be really interested. And I think there are answers to those questions that have been asked.
I actually researched a little bit with the Cave Creek because they went and did a lot of their elementaries into charter schools. And they were faced with a lot of the challenges that we've been faced with, teacher retention, high student, the high student teacher ratios, the low enrollment in some of their schools. And so when they did this, it actually worked out well for them. And what they've been able to do with their charter schools is they've been able to keep free full-day kinder as part of their elementary schools. One of my questions, and I did talk briefly with you about it, with the middle school being Maricopa Wells, I'm not so sure if that's the right fit for Maricopa Wells to turn that into a charter school. And some of my thinking is probably logistic from a parent point of view, but when we do decide a focus, and whether that be 20+1 type of learning environment, that school is centrally located in between an elementary school and the high school. And some of those parents that might not be a good fit for those students. And one of the things that we faced, one of the challenges that we faced as a board when we were looking at the possibility of closing a school, was because it was centrally located, the transportation to Desert Wind was just going to be too costly and too inconvenient for parents. So when the parents have to make those choices regarding their middle school, because there's not that many choices, because we only have 2 middle schools, it's either going to be a traditional model or it's going to be a charter school. And if Maricopa Wells is the charter school and that's not going to be a good fit for their student, they're going to have to be responsible for the transportation out to Desert Wind. And I don't think it's that far, but the community perception of the school being out in Tortosa seems far away. So that's kind of one of my drawbacks, one of my concerns about changing Wells. I mean, I understand that Maricopa Wells has been challenged with the grade level being, dropping down, and we've had, the state almost came in and we had to put together a corrective action plan for the school. And I understand how that could really help change the school I'm kind of torn on where that middle school charter should be.
Yeah, I think that's a valid issue, and I think I have a real strong reason for recommending that Pima Butte remain our traditional school. It's not such a strong argument at the middle level. I could argue it either way. I agree on that. Personally, if I had to choose, I think I'd choose Maricopa Wells, but I would admit that it could work equally as well, I think, to have Desert Wind as our charter.
Comment I have on Maricopa Wells, I mean, you're right, it could go either way. The nice thing about Maricopa Wells is it has the individual buildings. So if at some point you decided to do a K-8 charter or expand it, it would lend itself to be able to really evolve into whatever that staff and principal and district decided that was going to happen. But as far as the transportation, couldn't we still provide transportation to Desert Wind?
We could, yes. I mean, that's an
Yeah.
option we have. It's not on the drawing board right now. At the very least, parents could transport to a bus stop that's probably closer than driving out to Desert Wind. So there'd be some options there. But I think you raise an important point, because facilities are part of this discussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we grow, we're going to have a decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
We're either going to have to put sixth grade back into the middle schools, or we're going to have to create a K-8 school and then another K-8 school at the middle schools, in my judgment, because you know, we just we're going to have excess capacity, and we're going to have growing enrollment, so the kids have to go somewhere. And it's probably a better answer to create a K-8 elementary than it is to buy a bunch of portables or build a new school. Try to pass a bond to build a new school. K-8 schools are very common in our state, and that's another example I think that can help us down the road. Parents like to have options, and for some parents, a K-8 option I think would be very appealing to them. And so I think that's in our future as we continue to grow, but it's a little further down the road.
This was a hard decision and trying to get all the information. I did talk to several different school board members on Friday, talked to our executive director at Arizona School Board Association. And the reason I had a problem with it, because I'm a real traditional public school gal. And that was really hard for me to understand the change. But the reality is, our state has redefined public education. It is no longer the same definition as it was even 10 years ago. And our state has turned education into a competitive-driven commodity. And unfortunately, the rules have changed. So why not jump on board and be a part of that competition and make our schools the best? And if this gets us to that level, our goal is to be an A district. You know, why do I need to sit by the sidelines and keep complaining when I could jump on board and make our schools an A district? I mean, to me, that's my goal. You know, why do our kids deserve any less? So we can let this competition fail us, or we can let this competition make us better. I choose to make us better. And it was hard to veer off of public education. But it's no longer defined the same, and the state does not fund it the same. And by all trends, the state will not go back to how it was funded in previous years. Is there a movement, a ground rules movement, to get the legislation to continue and to fully fund public education? Absolutely. But that's going to take time. Right now, the way I see it, these are the rules, these are our circumstances. Why should we expect anything less for our kids, and why settle for mediocrity? If this gives us the opportunity to open doors, to create programs, and to create better schools, why wouldn't we do it? But it was tough. I mean, all the same questions. It's a tough change, but we've got to change the way education is approached, and we want the best. So I like the resolution. Now that I've talked to other districts and gathered information, I like the fact that we are able to be innovative, we're able to be creative with our curriculum. Mandates are not as strict, but we still have our high standards of our policies and our board of directors that are elected by the public. So we still answer to the public. As long as that is intact, I think that this product could work for our community. That's my statement.
I have a question. We will get extra funding with the charter. What happens to the 3 traditional public schools? Are we going to be able to expand, like, let's say, specials at the elementary school, electives at middle school and the high school? Or are we just going to be stagnant at these traditional schools because the extra funding goes to the charters?
Well, the goal will be that we won't be stagnant, and I think it's a good question, fair question. It's interesting, if you go on the Cave Creek website, you won't be able to tell which one, I think you're the one that told me that.
Yep.
You won't be able to tell which one is the traditional school.
Yep.
And it's because the district has made a conscious effort to have quality programs in every single school. So I'm still new enough at this. I can't tell you exactly how the funding is going to match up and how we're going to do it. I do think there will be some offset costs of things that we are paying for out of M&O right now that we can offset with charter funding.
Okay.
That will open up some dollars, not a lot, but we'll have some additional flexibility with funding to be able to make some improvements. $4 million a year is a lot of money, and we should be able to, make that go a long way over 9 schools. And that would be the goal, and it's something that we're going to have to work on and coordinate, but this is something that, as I said, we will coordinate closely from the district office to make sure that we have 9 quality schools. Our goal is not just to have 6 quality schools, and that's a commitment I'm willing to make, that we're gonna make this work for all 9 schools.
Teacher salaries, how will that all fit into this? Will they get increases and get their
The person I've been spending a lot of time on the phone with and in person with and emailing with is the superintendent at Cave Creek, Debbie Burdick, and that's really that's the approach they have taken. Other districts have done some interesting things, but I really like the way Cave Creek has done it, and they basically said, we're going to carry forward with our current governing board policy book and our current contracts, our current salary schedules. Retirement system isn't going to change. Benefits aren't going to change. That's our commitment to our employees, that we're not going to make this work by lowering teacher salaries, for example. And that's why some charter schools do it. Not all of them, but some of them do it that way. So teachers wouldn't see any difference, and I think they would. Well, that is something I haven't gotten to the bottom of yet. There is additional funding available clearly, and what those limitations are on that, I am not knowledgeable of yet. But I'll find the answer out to that.
Dr. Chestnut, the schools that, if they're converted to charter, are those teachers still eligible for the 301 funds?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer, but we'll get that answer. They are eligible?
Yes.
Oh, we know the answer? There it is.
Okay. I mean, I knew the answer, but I wanted to clarify that, sorry. But these are all good, these are all questions that have come up from the community. The other one is teachers are worried about the 200 days and getting the pay. There is a movement to increase that to 8%, but it's not a have to go to 200 days, correct? Isn't that the way I read it? It may.
Correct.
If that school chooses, or the board chooses for that school, could go, but it's not a have to, correct?
When it comes to charter schools, like for them to decide their focus, or if they wanted to change the days of the schools, what is the board's role with that? Does it have to be board approved?
The board approves the charter. So it's not the board that would decide if a school had a 200-day school year, but if a school came with that built into their charter, the final step is that it would have to be approved, but that charter would have to be approved by the governing board. So it would put a little more decision-making, customization ability at each school site. But our goal would be, clearly, the way to make this work would be to set up those parameters that each school would work on. And one of them would be, we're going to participate in district professional development initiatives. That's something we want to continue. We want to have a quality product out there in all of our elementary schools, and that's an example of something that would continue to be district-wide. There'd be some flexibility with, at the building site, they might need some special professional development for their area of focus, but there's also going to be some district-wide initiatives.
So each individual school plan would come before the board as they write it up in there, and they would have a year.
Yes, and that's basically
Okay.
what the resolution says, is that you're approving these schools as charters subject to final approval of their charter document.
Of the governing board.
Governing board would give
Right.
final approval to the charter documents for each school, yes.
Okay.
Grade level for the schools that would become charters with the Arizona Department of Education. Because they'd be changing into charter, will the grade level, will they wipe out like with the public school grade and start from scratch, or how does that, do they take the scores from when they were a public school to now they're in the charter school? How does that?
Well, we're already going to have that issue even if we do nothing, because we've kind of changed our
sixth
grade
grades, yeah.
levels. But as I understand the answer is yes. We'll have to explain to the public what, there's a slight difference between this year's letter grade and last year's letter grade for this reason, because we have different grade levels in the school or whatever, but yes.
Okay, I know I've talked way too much, but Dr. Chestnut, on your slide where you talked about the cons, just the information I have as far as, not eligible for soft capital, well, there is no soft capital anymore anyway, so that's a moot point. School facility board's not eligible for that money, which goes to building schools. The state has not funded that, and they don't plan on funding it. So that is a moot point also. And then as far as the bond and overrides, this community, unfortunately, has not passed a bond or override. And my fear is, I don't know if that's always our best solution, is to rely on an increase in taxes. So that was just my comment on those three cons that, those could even be taken out because we don't have a bond anyway. So, but the existing public schools, as far as it would be Pima Butte, one of the middle schools and the high school, could still go for an override or a bonding if the board chose to do that for those three schools. But past history has shown us that's not favorable from the community. So, that's the reality. That's my reality, I guess. So, okay. Mr. Bartle, you've been so patient while we monopolize the conversation. Is there questions, comments, motions?
I make a motion that we approve the resolution of charter schools as recommended by our superintendent.
I will second that. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The resolution for the charter schools for Maricopa Unified School District has been approved. Is that all? Do I need to read it? Okay. Good discussion. Thank you. Again, good comments. I appreciate it. Okay. 7C and D. Approved to adjourn into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll go into executive session.